I'm Liz Faublas, and this is Currents. It's an important anniversary for a local Catholic media outlet.
And there's no better way to evangelize in this day and age than to strengthen our parishes, which are the source of evangelization for the vast majority of our Catholic people.
Plus, in a world of Twitter and Facebook, the value of being silent. And getting the word out the old-fashioned way.
Here we are now on the second floor of the new studio for Radio Maria.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. Well, it may be a few months away, but Pope Benedict is not wasting any time in getting his message out for World Communications Day. In that message, Benedict says people should be able to use, quote, various types of websites, applications, and social networks to find time for reflection. The Pope says that in concise phrases, no longer than a verse from the Bible, profound thoughts can be communicated. And although Catholics have embraced the blogosphere and social media, they are also no strangers to the airwaves. A perfect example, the folks over at Radio Maria, the Spanish language version of the worldwide network, marked 11 years on the air here in New York. They celebrated this past weekend with a mass at St. Patrick's Cathedral.
Estamos celebrando este 11 aniversario de estar llevando el mensaje de salvación a las comunidades, llegando a aquellos hermanos que a veces la única opción que tienen para formarse es el radio, o la única opción que tienen para escuchar la palabra de Dios, para orar, es la radio.
Radio Maria announces the Lord's revelation, whole and entire. It does it beautifully, and it does it with great devotion. Our parishes are strengthened because the listeners become involved in the parish council. They become catechists. They become Eucharistic ministers. They become participants in the parish life. And there's no better way to evangelize in this day and age than to strengthen our parishes, which are the source of evangelization for the vast majority of our Catholic people.
Por toda la familia mundial de Radio María, por todos los voluntarios, los donantes, empleados y toda la audiencia, para que juntos llevemos la luz y la salvación al mundo. Roguemos al Señor.
20 years ago, we started here in New York in Italian, 11 years ago in Spanish, and only 2 years ago in English. So it is like a process. It takes time for people to learn that there is such a thing like Radio Maria, to listen and like it. The extraordinary thing of Radio Maria is that once you start listening to it, it becomes part of your life, because you pray with Radio Maria, you laugh with Radio Maria, you cry with Radio Maria. So it becomes like a member of your family.
Oran muy bonito, sí, y dan muchos consejos buenos.
Antes vivía muy deprimida y desde que está Radio María ya se me quitó. Vivo bien, vivo tranquila.
Y seguirá y todo se va a acabar. Otros 11 años y siempre va a ser mejor.
Rogamos por todos aquellos que hacen posible a Radio María y por todos los que se benefician de sus extraordinarios programas.
I believe, precisely because we are living in these difficult times, that Radio Maria is bringing into our homes a little bit of hope, a little bit of good news, a little bit of understanding what is happening in our life, in our world. So even though we are in a difficult economic situation, but the time is right for Radio Maria because it brings back a little bit of stability, a little bit of peace, a little bit of hope to the people that they are hurting very much.
And congratulations to Radio Maria. We wish them many more years of success here in New York and around the world. And stay tuned, there's more currents ahead. Bishops continue to speak out about the new contraception mandate. We'll hear what they have to say and have the rest of the day's headlines next. Welcome back to Currents. I'm Liz Faublas. Coming up later, another look at a groundbreaking Catholic ministry. But first, let's have a look at the day's headlines. Well, the Bishop of Cheyenne says he hopes U.S. bishops will take the new Health and Human Services mandate to the Supreme Court. In a message released over the weekend, Bishop Paul Aten echoes the words of his fellow bishops. He says the mandate requiring most religious organizations to provide contraception and sterilization in health plans has a narrowly defined religious exemption. Now, Aten says the government is disregarding the church's constitutional protection of conscience. He says he hopes U.S. bishops will challenge the new HHS mandate to the highest court. And the Bishop of Lincoln, Nebraska is not mincing any words with his take on the Health and Human Services Secretary. Bishop Fabian Bruskowitz says HHS Secretary Kathleen Sebelius is a bitter, fallen-away Catholic. In a letter to Catholics in his diocese, Bruskowitz says of the new HHS mandate, "We cannot and will not comply with this unjust decree." It is not the first time Sebelius has been questioned on matters of faith. Back in 2008, when she was Kansas's governor, Kansas City Archbishop Joseph Naumann asked Sebelius to refrain from receiving communion because of her support for abortion rights. Meanwhile, the Archbishop for the U.S. military is weighing in on the situation in Iraq. Archbishop Timothy Broglio says the U.S. invasion of Iraq was a contributing factor to the steep decline in the Christian population there. Now, speaking with Catholic news agency, Broglio says Iraq's Catholic population was a minority that was protected, but now they are not protected. Well, from Philadelphia, Archbishop Charles Chaput says Catholics in his state should urge legislators to create vouchers for Catholic schools. The message comes only weeks after the Philadelphia Archdiocese announced it would close 4 high schools and 44 regional or elementary schools. Chaput says the crisis in the Philadelphia schools is an unpleasant but finally very healthy wake-up call. Just one day to go before Florida voters decide on a Republican presidential nominee. Over the weekend, former House Speaker Newt Gingrich spoke out strongly on one of the life issues: embryonic stem cell research. Gingrich, one of 2 Catholics in the GOP race, calls such research the use of science to desensitize society over the killing of babies. He said he would ban all research on embryonic stem cells. Meanwhile, former Pennsylvania Senator Rick Santorum is back on the campaign trail. Santorum took a little more than a day off to be with his ailing 3-year-old daughter, Bella, who was stricken with a bout of pneumonia. Bella has a rare and fatal genetic disorder. Santorum said of the period of recovery from pneumonia, she was without a doubt has turned the corner. New violence against Coptic Christians in Egypt. The Assyrian International News Agency reports a group of more than 3,000 Muslims looted and burned Christian homes and shops in Alexandria over the weekend. Now, a priest there says security forces were contacted but arrived very, very late. 2 Copts and 1 Muslim were injured. The incident reportedly began following a rumor that a Christian man had an image of Muslim women on his cell phone. Well, Christians in Indonesia, meanwhile, have taken to the streets to demand their freedom. UCA News reports they protested outside the home of Indonesia's president, demanding the return of their rights as citizens to worship. A spokesperson for a Christian group says 2 Muslim groups commit acts of violence and vandalize our cars when we gather. The Christians say local authorities have not been effective in providing protection. Meanwhile, a new report says between 100 and 200 children in the Horn of Africa are dying each day because of famine. According to the Vatican news agency Fides, between 35,000 and 65,000 children in the region died last year. The famine is a result of severe drought that has hit the area in the past 50 years. A message of benevolence from Pope Benedict in his weekly message. Rome Reports has those details.
During Sunday's Angelus, the Pope talked about abuse of power in both the workforce and social life. The Pope said those in authority should be guided by an attitude of service.
Spesso per l'uomo autorità significa possesso, potere, dominio, successo. Per Dio invece l'autorità significa servizio, umiltà, amore. Significa entrare nella logica di Gesù che si china a lavare I piedi dei discepoli.
The Pope also took time to talk about World Leprosy Day. Every year, about 230,000 people suffer from the disease, especially in India, Brazil, and Indonesia.
Vorrei far giungere il mio incoraggiamento a tutte le persone affette da questa malattia, come pure a quanti li assistono. In diversi modi si impegnano per eliminare la povertà e l'emarginazione, vere cause del permanere del contagio.
The Pope also talked about the International Day of Intercession for Peace in the Holy Land, which is celebrated on January 30th. To honor the cause, a group of Italian families and young adults gathered in St. Peter's Square to pray for world peace. At the end of the Angelus, the Pope released white doves from his window, but after being released, they decided to go back into the Pope's study.
Vogliono stare nella casa del Papa.
The doves were released to symbolize peace. Some saw it as a metaphor of the long road that still lies ahead.
Meanwhile, Pope Benedict remembered former Italian President Oscar Luigi Scalfaro as an illustrious Catholic statesman. Scalfaro died over the weekend. He was 93 years old. In a message to the late president's daughter, Benedict says Scalfaro did his best to promote the common good and the values of Christianity. According to an obituary in the UK newspaper The Telegraph, Scalfaro attended daily mass and had a tendency to tearfulness. And former New Hampshire Governor Joseph Garahy is being remembered for his strong devotion to Catholic faith and pro-life issues. Garahy died last week. He was 81 years old. In an interview with the Rhode Island Catholic, Garahy's son John said his father had a very strong faith and a strong commitment to the church. According to the paper, one of Garahy's best-known pro-life stands was denying the use of Medicaid funds for most abortions in Rhode Island, a policy that is still in effect today. Garahy served 4 two-year terms as Rhode Island's governor before declining to run for re-election in 1984. Well, stay tuned. There's more currents ahead. Coming up, keeping quiet amid the social media noise. This month, Pope Benedict released his message for the 2012 celebration of World Communications Day entitled Silence and Word, Path of Evangelization. Using today's influx of social media tools as a backdrop, the Pope stressed the importance of virtual sanctuaries that offer silent reflection, thoughtful dialogue, and true meaning in life. Joining us to discuss the Pope's message of silence amid a flood of information and nonstop chatter in today's media is Reverend Robert Barron. He is founder of Catholic blog wordonfire.org, which posts daily commentaries, opinions, and videos on topics such as this one. And the blog currently draws over 1 million visitors a year from every continent. Father Barron, thank you for joining us from Illinois.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Father, first question, what did you think of Pope Benedict's message, Silence of the Word?
Yeah, I thought it was fascinating. When someone first told me about it, before I read it, they said, the Pope's talking about silence. I thought, silence? You know, we're into this world of communication. But then I read it, and I know the Pope has been signaling this theme for a while, and I thought it was just a very interesting and much-needed emphasis. So I was intrigued by it.
And I'd like you, Father, to please clarify for our audience, Pope Benedict is not denouncing social media in any way. No. On the contrary, he's urging the faithful to use it in a more introspective way, correct?
Quite right. And what's really interesting, look over the past 5 years, the Vatican has shown a tremendous interest in social communication. Archbishop Celli, who runs the Vatican office for social communication, is very interested in the new media. In fact, he hosted a conference last year where he brought together bloggers and commentators. Cardinal Ravazzi, who runs the Dicastery for Culture, had me over and many others last year for a conference on the same thing. So the Vatican has been very interested in that, and so is the Pope. But what he's pointing out is a very important balance. The danger of our situation now is that we just get so much information that we can't possibly take it in. We can't possibly process it. And what you need is this prayerful space of silence that allows the words to speak to you. So I thought it was an extremely important caution, warning, emphasis, so that we can handle all the words coming to us much more creatively.
Mm-hmm. And what I also found interesting, Father, is that it says that as much, if not more, this message, this silence could be said with silence instead of the spoken word. Is this a reflection of the Pope's personality, this message?
Yeah, to some degree, I'd say. I mean, he's a more introspective, scholarly gentleman, and I think he's someone who knows how to savor silence. There's no way you could write the articles and books that he's written without a lot of, space for silence. But I wouldn't want to overstress that, where like just kind of little, private hang-up of Pope Benedict. I think it's something that applies universally, and especially to those of us who use words a lot to communicate the gospel. I think he means there's got to be a contemplative space, that's part of it. But also that silence itself speaks. That if God is not a thing in the world, but God is the very source of the existence of the world, it means that God is not one of the items we can point to, or one of the things we can, in an ordinary sense, talk about. Like you and I can talk about things going on in the world. We can use words for that. There is something about God, though, that resists that move, because God isn't some object in the world that I can describe easily. And therefore, silence has always been recognized as key in, I'll put this in quotes, in describing God, Even the word mystery is interesting to me. It's from a Greek word muein, which means to be quiet. Our word mute would come from that. So a mystery is that which you can't really speak about. So I think the Pope is driving at all these dimensions.
And also what I did find in reading the message was that Pope Benedict certainly has a grasp on the Twitter-like method of messaging these days. He says that writing, one can communicate in, quote, concise phrases, often no longer than a verse from the Bible. They can express profound thoughts that can really be communicated as long as those taking part in the conversation don't neglect to cultivate their inner lives. Is that easier said than done, Father?
Yeah, sure. But, I mean, he's dead right about that, is that you won't be able to benefit from this world or contribute to it. I mean the world of, cyberspace and new media, unless you do have a contemplative heart. There's got to be a silent space where the wisdom emerges. Then you can communicate it effectively. And even things like those, like a tweet, a very short communication can be like a poem. A poet sometimes will just sum up something in a very short phrase. But see, that's born of wisdom, and wisdom is born of silence. So that's a very important point he's making, I think, is that we're all jumping in there, we're all talking, blah, 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 talking, and we do it so easily now. Sit down and you can type messages to all corners of the world. But where's all that coming from? Just like from the frothy surface of your life, just from a quick emotional reaction. I think of my own, work on the web, and people can comment, things on YouTube and all that. You get these very quick, sometimes mean-spirited responses. And you think, well, where's that coming from? That's not coming from a deep space of silence and wisdom. And the Pope is calling us to find that space. And then our communication becomes, that much better. And
I want to add really quickly, Father, in the time that we have left, you're certainly no stranger to social media. I know we can follow you on Twitter, and you have nearly 200 online commentaries on YouTube. Do you incorporate some of Pope Benedict's message of silence and introspection into your social media agenda?
Well, I would say it's more of a personal thing. I would take to heart very much what he says, that, as I mentioned, wisdom is born of silence. And if you're going to say something wise that's really helpful to people, then you've got to be cultivating that space. I'll give you an example. In our Word on Fire office here, where I'm speaking to you from, we just about 10 minutes ago, we all prayed a decade of the Rosary. So it's our little practice. We have Mass every day. Then after lunch, we pray a decade of the Rosaries. I want the team here to know that prayer has got to condition the whole day. So that's where we're trying to take, the Pope's message very seriously.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Father. That was very interesting. Thank you so much for joining us today. And
My
it
pleasure.
is
Thank
worth
you.
noting that Pope Benedict released his message for World Communications Day on the feast of St. Francis de Sales, the patron saint of journalists. And stay tuned, there's more currents ahead. When we return, marking a new beginning for an important media ministry. Well, we started tonight's show with a celebration marking the 11th anniversary of Radio Maria's Spanish language station here in New York. But last year, the network marked another important milestone, the dedication of a new studio for their English language broadcast. Cardinal Egan was again on hand for what was a very festive occasion.
3, 2, 1, 0. Viva Maria! today. We inaugurated the studios of Radio Maria in the English language here in New York. Radio Maria has already, in the English language, has been here already for 10 years in the United States. And so we own 10 stations in Texas, Louisiana, Port Arthur, Ohio, but not in New York. So it's a big event. It's a big milestone. Finally, we have come to the center of the world, so to say.
Here we are now on the second floor of the new studio for Radio Maria. We are to be evangelizing all the time. And what Radio Maria is going to do is repeat what has been revealed. Tell the world the wonders that our God has told to us.
Somos Radio María, una sola radio, una sola misión.
Radio Maria started from this little parish in the north of Italy. There was so not a strategy to do a worldwide project. It was the evidence of the people and the people that asked for it in their country. And little by little, this kind of experience brought Radio Maria in Africa, in Latin America, and so at the moment we have more or less 60 countries, and the result is a really big listening and enthusiasm of the people.
Estás en sintonía con Radio María, una voz cristiana en su casa, transmitiendo para New York, New Jersey y Connecticut. My motivation is the people that listen to the radio station. Most of the listeners that we have is people that feel alone, you know, old people that their family doesn't visit them. And when they call, they say, you know, my companion is Radio Maria. You know, when I listen to the programs, I can call and pray the rosary. Be in touch with the people, that's actually what make me come here every, 5 days a week and help this radio to grow.
I congratulate all the supporters and all those who work with Radio Maria. You're doing the work of Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. Nothing could be better or more important, and Radio Maria will do it with style, with nobility, and with excellence.
And that is all for this edition of Currents. Coming up tomorrow, when it comes to marriage, preparation is key. A deacon who is an expert on this subject shares his insights. Until then, be sure to visit us online at currentsny.net. We are also on Facebook and Twitter. And if you have a question, comment, or story idea, email us. The address is dropusaline@currentsny.net. For all of us here at Currents, I'm Liz Faublas. Thank you for watching and have a great night.